back to Scoundrels, Inc., another Star Wars podcast. I am Frank Janish, and I'm with Brandon Hanna this week to talk about Star Wars The Bad Batch, Episode 9, The Harbinger, part of Season 3, the last season. And this one saw us finally see Asajj Ventress. So, Brandon, before we really dive into the meat of the episode, what were your overall thoughts and feelings walking away from the episode? Because I've kind of seen I've seen a little bit of some interesting opinions, but I'm curious how you received the episode.
Frank, they finally said it. They said midi-chlorians.
They did
and
it.
Kevin's not even here.
I know.
Oh my God, I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to text him because I didn't know if he watched the episode yet, but I was like, oh my God, have you watched it? Come on, watch it. Yeah, they said midi-chlorians. But they went right back to saying M count afterwards.
Which, that's fine.
I was like, that's too much. Let's take a step back. Yeah, no, I liked it. I liked seeing Ventress in like a mentor type role, and using the light side of the Force and the dark side at times, which was funny too, because like I don't know if I watched in the middle of the day. There's always glare on my TV. I can't see everything, but like Omega made that comment. She was like, "Oh, like Ventress, maybe you don't even know what you're talking about. Maybe you can't even like do the Force or whatever." And I'm like, "Didn't you walk in on her like Force choking Wrecker?" Or like, I'm like, "Did you not see that?" Yeah. Like he was like in the air, wasn't he? So, but yeah, no, the whole, little bits of what we've gotten in like the Disney era that I really like, with like the Force users communicating like with animals and having that like symbiotic relationship with the world around them. And it's very reminiscent of Luke training Rey in The Last Jedi. The whole like reach out part, like I thought they were just gonna do the same thing over and over again. Yeah. She was like no, reach out with your feelings. Like that was too crosshair. I'll work on it. But yeah, so I don't know, I dug it. I like the yellow lightsaber. I like the haircut,
Yeah. So there you go, Brandon's brief thoughts, and then we'll really get into the episode. But look, we're at 2,000 something subscribers. If you haven't subscribed, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, leave a comment down below what you thought about this episode, and were you excited that they finally said midi-chlorians and instead of M count, and how do you feel about what they, I think, somewhat established with Omega, which I think we're going to get into here. So go ahead and leave your comments down below. You can follow us on our social medias, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, all those links in the description below. You can also listen to us on our podcast feed, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. That's where we are at. You can follow our feed wherever you consume your podcasts. And so there we go. That's it. Okay, trying to make a transition into the next part now. So, I'll say I kind of walked away from the episode with somewhat of mixed feelings. I walked away from it like, I liked it. I liked what they did here. And then I asked myself, well, what exactly did they do here? Because I feel like, just to really jump into the overall outcome of this episode was, I guess, basically they established that, yes, Omega does have a high M count, which we kind of basically knew already given the test that was done on Mount Tantus, right? Now, our characters, the Bad Batch, Omega, Hunter, Wrecker, Crosshair, they did not know that. They did not know what M count was. And so this episode was really more about, or it was in part about them catching up to what the audience knows. I feel like I don't know if you share that same sentiment, Brandon, at least on that area.
Yeah, it seemed like I was getting a little frustrated with Hunter. Like, I know like Ventress like did like bad things in the war.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, she hit the nail on the head. She's like, hey, the enemy's the Empire. Like we were both manipulated. Like I was just surprised that like Hunter like hasn't already seen the big picture that like Republic, Separatist, like the enemy's the Empire. It doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
But I totally get his hesitation. Like he's like, oh yeah, like I knew Ventress. Like she decapitated 10 of my brothers in one single battle. It's pretty awful. I don't trust her. Makes sense, but still, yeah. But no, I was wondering that myself, and yeah, basically just came to the conclusion like, yeah, they're just getting caught up to speed. It's like it was worth it for them because now they know what M count means, and they know that Omega is force sensitive, and that's not information that they had before. And like we already like kind of knew, like it wasn't confirmed, and I even kind of like believed Ventress at first until like Hunter was like, "You're lying."
Right?
Like,
yeah.
I'm lying. Like, you know.
Well, to speak to that point though, Brandon, I kind of believed Asajj as well because I'm like, well, she's a clone. Clones could not possibly be force sensitive enough through the Kaminoans cloning technology. Why wouldn't other clones be, and maybe sometimes that's kind of like the Jurassic Park thing where the missing DNA code or whatever, if you don't switch it out then you'll have male dinosaurs. But like maybe it was a genetic error or genetic sequencing whatever error in terms of repressing the M count, because that would then mean that wouldn't that almost mean that Boba Fett and Jango Fett would have a high M count unless it's just purely through Kaminoan cloning technology, which I think is probably the case, because I look back at Hemlock and how he is so adamant about Tanwi, or Nalase rather, about do your job, figure this out, you can do it. And Nalase is very hesitant to do it because I think on some level she understands that in the hands of the Empire this could be very bad for the galaxy at large. I mean, what are your thoughts in terms of basically Asajj saying, yeah, she has a high M count. She would be we would train her right now, but she's not going to leave you guys and Hunter's like, that's not an option. Like, duh, we get it. But so where does your, I guess, mindset land in terms of how do you feel about her having a high M count, midi-chlorian count, and how do you think that would apply to Boba Fett and Jango Fett?
No, I don't think so. Like I could see like secretly like them having Jedi-like reflexes is what makes them the greatest bounty hunters in the galaxy of their time. Sure. But like, yeah, probably not. It's probably like something to do with the Kaminoans experiments and why they even made Omega in the first place, or maybe it was just they were just playing around and it was an anomaly and they were like, oh crap, well, let's keep an eye on her because we didn't mean to do that. But yeah, I don't know. I was like back and forth. I thought maybe Ventress. To me, it seemed like she was internally struggling with like, I could take Omega with me as an apprentice, and like train her in the ways of the Force. But I'm also wondering, like, with her relationship with Quinlan Voss being a part of the Path at some point, or like being involved with the Path, protecting like Force sensitive children from the Empire, like that is also like a part of her motive. She's like, I'm either going to train this girl or I'm going to like keep her in hiding so the Empire doesn't get to her. And right now her best bet is staying with the Bad Batch, because like I'm going to give them some advice, like get off this planet, you're not safe here, but outside of that they're safer, she's safer with them than anywhere else. Was my
if not with her.
Yeah.
Yeah, she well established. She could kick their ass all willy nilly, all up and down the field, all day long. Which I mean, it was a cool sequence actually between Asajj and the other three. It was a cool sequence, but it was just like, guys, she will destroy you. She's literally just playing with you. Like, she's not even breaking a sweat. I think they kind of established that a little bit with you can hearing Hunter and Wrecker and all them huffing and puffing, and Asajj is like, come on, like, think this through. Like, what do you think is going to happen? So what's interesting about this Omega development is, well, also I want to kind of go back to some of the lines that Asajj was saying to Omega on that boat, in terms of, or I think she was even saying this to Hunter and Wrecker and Crosshair about, you know, well, I think at first she was saying, like, everyone has this in them to some varying level, right? And this is kind of like, this is like tangentially connected to Sabine's arc in terms of tapping into the Force. You know, Ahsoka saying, you know, it resides in all living things. You just have to learn how to tap into it. Asajj also had gone on to say that, you know, if this was recognized, if Omega had been identified earlier, she would have already been training. It is different, though, because she is a clone, so there is that aspect. But Asajj also says that Omega goes, "Oh, I'm a Jedi," and Asajj goes, "No, you're not a Jedi. You need to be trained to be a Jedi." And I think that also is something that applies to the Sabine arc in terms of, you don't necessarily, and I know people will get up in arms about this, and they have in the past when Ahsoka was coming out, you don't necessarily have to have a super high aptitude for wielding the Force to be a Jedi. You know, to be a Jedi, it's different training to be a Jedi, to follow the Jedi way, the Jedi path. But yeah, the Jedi Order wanted high M count, high midi-chlorian people because they have, you know, the propensity to wield the Force much better than, you know, some moisture farmer on Tatooine. Little do they know. Blah, blah, blah. Anyways, so they're laying out this stuff, you know, through Asajj, and that's interesting. Now, what I do find interesting, we keep, you know, over the course of this show, the seasons of this show, we always wonder, how is this show going to end? Where are these characters going to end up? You know, what happens to them? And I think it's safe to say that they have established that Omega has a high midi-chlorian count. Asajj would have taken, I think, Omega, or she was debating whether or not to take Omega with her, but knew that the bad, you know, her brothers, you know, wouldn't let that happen, and maybe Omega wouldn't want to do that. I don't know. But now I've got to thinking, where does Omega end up with? Because this could also end up somewhat similarly with how Mando and Grogu, right? Mando says to Grogu, "You belong with your people. I'm going to find your people. I think it's best for you to go with your people, the Jedi, to train." That was his mandate from the armor and all that stuff. I wonder, throughout the course of these next, I think 5 episodes now, or 7 episodes we have left, if Hunter and company or whatever are going to say, maybe you need to train to protect yourself because we won't always be around. And so what if they do this? I don't know. This would be, I don't know how a lot of people would feel about this. Omega going off with Asajj Ventress to conclude the Bad Batch, and then your next animated show is with Asajj and Omega. And Force stuff happens in that show. I don't know. I don't know if they would go that route, Brandon, but what are your thoughts in terms of, they've put this out there. What are they going to, you're just going to let that information just stay in this episode and that's it? I don't really think that's going to be the case, but what say you?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, it sounds like Ventress has been having the same online debates as I do. It's like, oh, does this mean I'm a Jedi? Be like, no, being a Jedi is a very exclusive club. Just because you can read doesn't mean you get a library card, okay? Like, you know, you got to be welcomed in, okay?
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I had this thought just now. Wouldn't it be crazy if, like, the last shot of the show, it like cuts to the future and it's like a live action Omega older, and it's just like teases her appearing in like a new show or like The Mandalorian or something. That would be like a crazy thing for them to do. It'd be like Lego movie type, like, what the hell, like, Will Ferrell, you're real? But
right, yeah.
I don't know, but I kind of like that idea, like maybe another show, her going off with Ventress, training in the ways of the Force. It does make you wonder like what happened to her and what happens to the Bad Batch.
Mm-hmm.
If I was gonna say it could be an interesting choice for her to just, even though she has a high M count, for her to just choose not to learn the ways of the Force.
Yeah, totally.
I'm like, with that, we're kind of getting that a little bit with like Grogu in The Mandalorian.
Yeah.
You have to choose between being a Jedi and a Mandalorian, but at the same time, like Grogu does still use the Force, so he could
he
just
still
be
taps
a
in.
yeah, he could just be a Mandalorian that could Force choke you if he wants. You know? So, yeah, I don't know. I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, because I was also gonna mention that Ahsoka does mention about Grogu that his it'll just die off. Like the abilities will just kind of it'll wean off eventually, whereas Omega doesn't really have. She's not tapping into any of that. Although I will say, it is interesting that they did bring up again this season how she learned to meditate through Gungi, a Jedi, right? Mm-hmm. So she has that part kind of down a little bit, or she at least practices that part of the quote unquote Jedi way of meditation and centering oneself, which you see Jedi do a lot in these stories. So there is that little tiny nugget. Whether or not they mine that all the way and have Omega go off with Asajj at the end of this season, the finale, because let's say the Batch sacrificed themselves and now Omega would be alone, and where would she go? Hey Asajj, remember when you told me about the midi-chlorian thing? Yeah, all the other guys are, they're dead. So you think I could hop along with you? And she's like, you know what? I'm over here with Quinlan Voss, and we're like working on the path. I guess we could use your help. I don't know. It's really like this episode. I feel like did a lot, but also didn't do really anything at the same time. If that could even make any sense, I just feel like it opened up possibilities, and it just was like, here you go. We're not really going anywhere, but we're just gonna lay these nuggets out there, and we don't know if we'll mine them for for further stories or whatnot. I did think it was funny though that they kind of addressed Asajj and her lives. I have a couple lives left. I thought, okay, there you go. That was pretty.
That
nice.
was very Catwoman Batman Returns.
Oh very much so. Good call. Good call.
That was immediately popped in my head. I'm like, I've seen this before. But yeah, I like just trying to like predict what could happen. I guess we could see Ventress maybe come back. We could see. I know like this is like a story like about the clones. So like I think we still need. There's like some loose ends they need to be tied up with tech and things like that. But it makes me wonder like if the Empire is just struggling to get Omega back, so they literally send Darth Vader after her, and Ventress like intervenes and like sacrifices herself fighting Vader. That'd be pretty cool. But
that would be
as long as they could do it without taking away from the clones story. But yeah,
I mean, could you imagine this Vader, this era of Vader showing up? Because I mean, he's still pretty raw with the prosthetics at this point. I can't imagine. It's only been probably like a couple years at this point. I think since Revenge of the Sith, Order 66, and all of that. That would be wild.
Do we know like what time Vader starts like getting more involved with like the Imperial like Navy and like becomes more of like a public figure where people know about him? Like,
I think also he's not as much of a public figure. Actually, I think I feel like I've heard this where he's not really so much like a public figure, because even I think. Because I think anyone who runs into him always dies. So no one's really around to be like, yo, there's this Darth Vader guy.
Like I know like within the ranks of the Imperial military, probably, like they know about him. They know of him. They work with him. But like, I'm sure
galactically,
at some point the public has to at least like hear whispers about like this Imperial enforcer that just like shows up and could like kill an entire town of people with like his mind or something.
I mean, yeah, there's still people in that one village from Kenobi that are still alive. They'd be like, remember when he snapped that dude's neck?
Nobody believes him.
Right.
They're like, yeah, this like cyborg showed up with like a laser sword and just like snapped my cousin's neck for no reason. We're like, that doesn't, bro, I'm sure you're just under a lot of stress right now. It's probably just a stormtrooper.
Too many death sticks for this guy over here.
Be like, no, dude, he used his mind, I swear. I don't know.
You know what? I actually wanted to bring up to you the test that Asajj says she was doing on Omega. The first one seems like a legitimate test. The second one, not a real test. That was just to get Omega out of there, right? Because I don't. But then, what's funny is that like Asajj is doing this test on Omega, and she's like, stand on this rock and balance this, fruit on your head. And Omega's like, this is really slippery. Meanwhile, what they had to do for Anakin, Mace Windu was like, was it a ship or a cup? And it's like, like
it seems to me like the 3 tests, none of them were like actually tests, but there was like tests within the test that only Asajj knew about. Like, be like, oh yeah, try to balance this thing on your head, and that's not really what Asajj is looking at. Maybe she's looking for something else that we just can't see. I don't know.
Possibly. I think that the last one, the third one on the water, was probably like the most real test. I think some of them. I think like the first test, I think probably just like testing patience, or perseverance. Even the third one could have been a little bit more patience and clearing your mind and reaching out, all that stuff. That one felt more like a real test. The first two, I was like, especially the second one, I was like, how is that? Just run, like run back. Like, that's it.
It makes me think of that scene in Miracle when, like, Kurt Russell makes all the hockey players take, like, written tests, and, like, the one guy doesn't take the test, and then, like, months later, he's like, what? You mad at me because I didn't take your test? He's like, no, I want the kid who didn't take the test. Like, maybe we'll get something like that later on with Omega. No,
yeah, maybe.
I want the girl who didn't take the test.
Maybe. This was, like I said, this episode, I liked it, but I was also like, what? Like, we didn't really do a whole lot. We just kind of set up for the potentiality of stuff that might or might not happen. It was cool to see Asajj and mention of the Force, and yes, they finally said midi-chlorians in the show, even though it was only one time. But hey, look at we'll take the small victory. They said midi-chlorian. I'm curious now to see what's going to happen in these next episodes. We haven't seen like Hemlock and Tantus in a minute. I wonder what they're up to in terms of tracking Omega, because as Asajj said, get off this island because you're not as safe. And I think if you go back and you watch some of the trailers, it's like they show up, the Empire shows up on Babu, and it's gonna be too late. So that might happen next episode. I do think. I want to ask your thoughts on the title, though, of this episode, The Harbinger, applying to Asajj, but is there possibly another meaning that you might find with the title as it relates to what we got to learn, basically, in this episode? Any thoughts? I'm not sure I have any. I'm just wondering if you do.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it has to refer to Asajj just kind of like showing up, telling them what they need to know and warning them about what could happen next if they're not careful.
Yeah. All right. Well, before we get out of here, just want to briefly bring up the fact that the Phantom Menace is going to be back in theaters May 3rd, that whole weekend. They're doing also the marathon. Brandon, have you ever done a Star Wars theatrical marathon? Because I know they did one when Rise of Skywalker was coming out. I did that with one of my good friends, Danny, back home in Chicago. We did the whole saga leading up to Rise of Skywalker. Whew, it was pretty cool to be with a bunch of people who are really gung ho about Star Wars. I mean, you got to be if you're gonna buy like $100 marathon ticket, But Phantom Menace in theaters May 3rd. I got my ticket. You got your ticket, and again, have you ever done a theatrical marathon?
No, not for Star Wars. I don't. Yeah, I wanted to, but I've gone to like some of those like marathon screenings. I did like all 3 Planet of the Apes, the Matt Reeves ones,
Cool.
in one day. I did like all 3 Hobbit movies in one day. I think I've maxed out at 3.
Yeah, I know Marvel would do them too before they another Avenger, but I never did any of the Marvel ones because there was like I think there was like at that one point there was like 23. It was like a 23 movie marathon at that point or something. Like when Endgame was coming out, I think they did one for Endgame. Yeah, but did you get your tickets for Phantom Menace?
I will.
Okay, well, they might sell out quick. They might. You never. Probably not, but there will be I should say all the good seats will probably be taken by the time you get around to getting some tickets.
Listen,
but let me know.
Phantom Menace, every seat's a good seat, man. Come on.
That's depending where you. Is it Planet Chinese? I don't know. I gotta. Because I would totally go back.
That'd be cool.
That'd be great. I'm seeing it down in Torrance at the Del Amo down here. They got an IMAX, so I was like, yeah, AMC, A-list. Put it on the A-list. Okay, that's going to wrap it up here for this week's episode of Scoundrels, Inc., talking about Bad Batch, The Harbinger, Omega, Force Sensitive, Asajj, she showed up. Is that the end of it? Remains to be seen for the rest of the season, but here's hoping we get more on those developments, I guess. Again, let us know in the comments down below what you think might be the fate of Omega. Will this Force sensitivity stuff, pan out more? Will they dive deeper into it with Omega? Would you want them to dive more into it with Omega and Asajj? And could it lead to another animated series down the line? Because there was that one quote from the voice actress. I think she said this was like just a start. I'm like, and we talked about this a little bit last week, but like, I don't know. So again, leave your thoughts down below in the comments. That's gonna wrap it up here this week for Scoundrels Inc. I'm Frank Janish. That was Brandon Hanna. We will see you all next week.
Scoundrel. I like the sound of that.